The night Seoul swallowed him whole, Kang Jiwoo was not supposed to feel anything. He had trained himself for years, decade after decade of cold boardroom decisions, midnight executions of business rivals, and the kind of silence that only men with blood on their hands truly understood. He was the chairman of the Kang Empire, the shadow that made powerful men flinch when his name was whispered in dark hallways. He did not cry at funerals. He did not pause at sunsets. He certainly did not stop for children. And yet, on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening in the back alleys of Itaewon, when a tiny voice floated up through the grey curtain of rain and caught him somewhere behind his ribs, a place he had long forgotten existed, everything he had built himself into cracked, just slightly, like the first fracture in a dam that was always meant to break. "Mister," the voice said, "are you lost too?" He stopped walking. His two bodyguards, Tae and Minho, stopped behind him. The rain poured, and Kang Jiwoo, the man they called the Black Dragon of Seoul, the man whose enemies disappeared without graves, looked down. She was small, maybe 5 years old, maybe 6. Her skin was the color of warm midnight, deep and beautiful. Her eyes enormous and steady, holding none of the fear that adults usually showed when they looked at him. She wore a yellow raincoat 3 sizes too big for her tiny frame, the hood fallen back so her braids were already soaking wet, little beads at the ends clicking softly against each other in the rain. She held a soggy piece of paper in one hand, a map, it looked like, drawn in crayon, and she was looking up at him with the kind of patient, earnest curiosity that only children and saints possess. "I'm not lost," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She tilted her head, the way children do when they have already decided an adult is wrong but are too polite to say so immediately. "You look lost," she said simply. "You were standing in the rain, looking at nothing. That's what lost looks like." One of his bodyguards made a movement to usher him away. Jiwoo raised one hand slightly, just one finger lifting from his side, and Tae went still. "Where is your mother?" Jiwoo asked the girl. Her expression changed then. Something crossed her face. Not quite sadness, not quite fear. Something older than both. "She's looking for our building," the child said. "We just moved here. She told me to stay right here and don't move, but—" She looked down at her crayon map. "I thought I could find it myself and surprise her." "And did you find it?" A long pause. Rain drummed the pavement. "No," she admitted, her small shoulders dropping. "I think I made it worse." Jiwoo looked at the map she held out. It was unreadable, a child's rendering of streets that may or may not have existed in any logical arrangement, with a yellow star she had drawn, presumably marking home. He looked around the alley. This was a quiet stretch behind the commercial district, not dangerous in itself, but certainly not a place for a child to be alone at night. "What is your name?" he asked. "Zara," she said. "Zara Amara Mensah. My mum says to always say my full name so people know I'm not nobody." Something moved inside him again. He pressed it down. "Zara Amara Mensah," he repeated. "How old are you?" "6, she said proudly, "and a half." "Okay, Zara. What is your mother's phone number?" She recited it without hesitation, with the focused solemnity of a child who had been made to memorize it like a prayer. If you're already feeling this story, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. There is so much more coming, and you do not want to miss a single moment. Jiwoo called the number. It rang twice, and then a woman's voice came through, breathless, panicked, the raw edge of a mother who was 2 seconds from shattering. Zara? Zara, baby, where are you? I'm at the corner near the pharmacy. I've been… Your daughter is safe, Jiwoo said. His voice was calm. He had learned long ago that calm was the most powerful thing a voice could carry. She is with me. She is not hurt. Stay where you are. A beat of silence. Then, who is this? Who are you? How do you have my daughter? Put my daughter on the phone right now. Mummy! Zara grabbed the phone before Jiwoo could stop her. Mummy, I'm okay. I met a man in the rain. He's very tall, and he has a scary face, but I don't think he's actually scary. I think he's just sad. Jiwoo blinked. Minho, behind him, made a sound that was almost a laugh and quickly turned it into a cough. They found the mother at the pharmacy corner 3 streets away, and Jiwoo would remember the exact moment he saw her for the rest of his life. Not because she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, though she was, but because of the expression on her face when she saw Zara come running through the rain toward her. It was the kind of love that had no language. She dropped to her knees on the wet pavement without even thinking about her clothes, and she grabbed her daughter and held her like she was holding the entire reason she was still breathing. Zara! Oh my God, Zara! She was crying, not loudly. She was the kind of woman who cried quietly, the tears just falling without sound, the trembling only in her hands as she checked her daughter's face, her arms, her legs, making sure every piece of her was still there. When she finally stood, her eyes found Jiwoo across the rain-blurred distance between them. She was tall, nearly 5'9", with the kind of posture that told you she had been knocked down more times than she could count and had gotten up every single time by sheer decision. Her skin was a warm amber brown, her natural hair pulled back under a soaked headscarf, her eyes dark and sharp, and currently doing a very thorough assessment of him that he found unexpectedly interesting. She wore a coat that had seen better years and carried a bag stuffed with what appeared to be apartment documents. She walked toward him with Zara's hand in hers. "Thank you," she said. Her English carried the soft architecture of West African roots. Ghanaian, he thought. The vowels were different from American Black English, shaped differently, warmer and more deliberate. "I don't know how to…" She stopped, swallowed. "Thank you." "She was fine," he said. "She's a very sensible child." "She is," the woman agreed, glancing down at Zara with a look that was equal parts relief and exasperated love. "She is also a child who does not listen." She squeezed Zara's hand firmly, and Zara looked up with her bottom lip pulling out. "I was trying to help," Zara said. "We'll talk about helping at home," the mother said. She looked back at Jiwoo. "I'm Adeze Mensah." She extended her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm. He noticed that. "Kang Jiwoo," he said. She didn't recognize the name. He noticed that, too. Most people, when they heard his name, changed. Their eyes went slightly wider, or their posture shifted, or they started calculating something behind their smile. Adeze Mensah heard his name and simply nodded, as though he had told her something ordinary, and then she looked back at her daughter. He was not sure why, but that felt like the most remarkable thing that had happened to him in years. "Do you need help finding your building?" he heard himself say. He wasn't sure where the words came from. They were not in any plan he had for this evening. She hesitated. He could see the war in her face, the practical, tired woman who needed help versus the proud, careful woman who didn't take things from strangers. "It's the Hanwha residential complex on Itaewon Row," she said finally. "I have the address, but the GPS keeps…" "I know it," he said. My car is close. Another war crossed her face. Then Zara tugged her mother's hand and said, very reasonably, "Mummy, it's still raining," and that seemed to settle it. The drive was 7 minutes. Zara sat between them in the back of the black car, because Zara simply climbed in between them without asking, with the absolute social confidence of a 6-year-old who had never been told the world was dangerous. And she talked the entire way. She talked about Ghana, where they were from. She talked about the airplane. She talked about how Korean letters looked like little houses and windows to her, and she wanted to learn to read them. She asked Jiwoo what his favourite colour was. He said black. She frowned. She said her favourite colour was yellow, because yellow was the happiest colour, and she thought he could use some yellow in his life. Adeze pressed her lips together, trying not to smile. Jiwoo looked out the window at the passing city lights. When they arrived, he got out of the car. He didn't have to. His driver could have simply stopped. But he got out, and he helped carry the bag that was clearly too heavy, and he walked them to the door of the building. And when Adeze turned to thank him again, the light from the lobby caught her face, and he saw the exhaustion there. Not just tonight's exhaustion, but the deep kind. The kind that had been accumulating for years. "Are you all right?" he asked. It was not a thing he typically asked people. She smiled. It was a careful smile, the smile of someone who had learned to use smiling as armor. "Starting over is just tiring sometimes," she said. "But we're okay." He nodded. He almost walked away. He almost let that be the end of it. Then Zara grabbed 2 of his fingers, just 2, because his hand was too big for her whole hand to wrap around, and she looked up at him and said, "Will you be less lost tomorrow?" He looked down at her for a long moment. "Maybe," he said. She nodded seriously. "Good. Yellow helps. Remember." He walked back to his car with something strange and uncomfortable sitting in his chest, like a door inside him had been blown open and nobody had come to close it yet. He told himself it was nothing. He was wrong. He found reasons to go back. He knew they were reasons. He was not a man who deceived himself. But Seoul was his city, and Itaewon was his territory. He had legitimate business in that district twice a week. So when he stopped at the small park near the Hanwha complex on Thursday morning and found Zara sitting on a bench eating a mango, while Adeze spoke Korean with a language app on her phone, the coincidence was only partially manufactured. Zara saw him first. She pointed at him with her mango. "Mummy, the sad man." Adeze looked up. He watched the recognition cross her face, followed quickly by a kind of careful neutrality that told him she was smart enough to wonder about a man like him appearing twice. He sat down on the bench at a respectful distance. He bought Zara a juice from the nearby cart. He spoke very basic Korean with Adeze, correcting her tones gently, and she laughed. Actually laughed when she got a sentence completely wrong and said something entirely different from what she intended. He had not heard a laugh like that in a very long time. Not directed at him, at least. Over the following 3 weeks, it became a rhythm. Not a declared thing, not a date, not a relationship, not a conversation either of them named. Just moments. Tuesday afternoons when he would appear near the park. Saturday mornings when Zara would somehow end up on his side of the street at the market and drag her mother over because she had seen something she wanted to show him. Sunday evenings when he found himself sitting in the small living room of their apartment, which smelled of palm oil and cinnamon and Zara's art supplies, listening to Adeze talk about her work. She was a textile designer. Brilliant, he realized very quickly. She had left Ghana after her marriage fell apart. Her husband had left when Zara was 2. A man who she described only once, briefly, as someone who wanted a different version of me than the one I actually was. She had built a small business in Accra, but opportunity had called her to Seoul, where the Korean fashion market was looking for African-inspired design collaboration. She had a 6-month contract with a mid-sized design house called Sion Studio. It was not much, but it was a foot in the door. She was fighting, quietly and completely, every single day. He began to realize that everything about Adeze Mensah was quiet and complete. She did not perform her strength. She simply exercised it, like breathing. "You never ask me what I do," he said one evening, while Zara was asleep on the couch between them, her mouth slightly open, one bead clicking against the cushion. Adeze looked at him. "Would you tell me the truth if I asked?" A beat. "I run a corporation," he said. "Import, export, real estate, entertainment, legal businesses." "And the other businesses?" He looked at her steadily. "Which other businesses?" She held his gaze without flinching. "The ones that make men outside my building watch my windows at night." He went very still. "I noticed 3 days after we moved in," she said quietly. "I've lived in complicated places before. I know what surveillance looks like. I assumed you placed them." "They're for your protection," he said. "I didn't ask for protection." "No, but Zara ran into the rain alone once already." His voice was very calm. "I decided I didn't want that to happen again." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at Zara sleeping between them. When she looked back up, the careful neutrality was gone. Something more real was there instead, something that looked like a woman allowing herself to feel safe, just slightly, just for a second, even though it terrified her. "Jiwoo," she said. It was the first time she'd used just his first name. "What is this? What are we doing?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've never done this before." "Done what?" "This," he said. He didn't have a better word for it. Neither did she. But she understood. And that was the night he told her more. Not everything, never everything, not yet, but enough. Enough for her to understand who he was, where he came from, what the Kang name meant in the shadows of Seoul. His father had built an empire with methods that left stains no amount of legal revenue could entirely wash. Jiwoo had inherited both the empire and the stains. He had spent 15 years trying to build something cleaner on top of a dirty foundation, and the question of whether that was even possible was one he lived with every morning. She listened without interrupting, without gasping, without the performance of shock. When he finished, she said, "Do you want to be free of it?" "I don't know if men like me get to be free of it." "That's not what I asked." A long silence. "Yes," he said. "I want to be free of it." She nodded slowly, like she was filing that answer somewhere important. If you're watching this, and your heart is already in your throat, you are exactly where you should be. Like and subscribe because this story is just getting started and the best, and the most painful, parts are still coming. The first sign of trouble had a name, Park Sun-woo. Park Sun-woo was 54 years old, third in command of the Kang organization's operational arm, and he had spent the last decade waiting for the moment when Jiwoo made a mistake that could be leveraged. He was the kind of man who smiled constantly and whose eyes never participated in the smile. He wore his suits like weapons. He had twice attempted subtle board maneuvering to redirect Kang corporate assets into his own accounts, and twice Jiwoo had shut it down without confrontation, without accusation, just quietly, precisely, the way a surgeon removes something malignant without disturbing the surrounding tissue. Sun-woo had noticed Adeze. Jiwoo found out on a Wednesday. Minho placed a phone on his desk with a recording. Sunwoo's voice, speaking to someone in Busan, describing the African woman and her child as a weakness we should be interested in. Jiwoo listened to the recording twice. He set the phone down. He sat in his chair for approximately 4 minutes without moving. Then he picked up his own phone and made 3 calls. The calls were brief. His voice throughout all 3 calls was the same temperature it always was. Room temperature. No warmer, no colder. And this was the thing that men who worked for him had long since learned to fear most. When Jiwoo raised his voice, it meant he was still managing the situation. When his voice went completely flat, it meant the situation had already been decided. But the situation with Sunwoo was complicated by the fact that Sunwoo had allies on the board. Specifically, 2 senior members who had their own loyalties to the Park family, and who would see any direct action against Sunwoo as an opening for a broader challenge. This was not just a personal threat. This was a political one. Which meant Jiwoo could not simply make Sunwoo disappear. He had to be careful. And while he was being careful, Sunwoo moved first. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 men followed Adeze from Sion's studio to the market. She noticed them. She was always noticing things. She called Jiwoo from the market bathroom in a voice so controlled it was almost frightening. Not panic, not hysteria, just a woman who had identified a problem and was reporting it precisely, while her hands shook slightly with the effort of staying calm. "There are 2 men," she said. "One in a grey jacket, one in a blue cap. They've been behind me since I left the studio. Walk to the GS25 convenience store on the corner of the main street," he said. "Go in, buy something, go to the back near the drinks section and stay there." "Where's Zara?" "Zara is with Mrs. Kim at the complex. I checked 10 minutes ago." A pause. "You checked on her 10 minutes ago?" "I check on her every day." He was already moving, coat on, Minho at his side. "Go to the GS25, now." He reached her in 11 minutes. When he walked into the convenience store, she was standing near the cold drinks with a bottle of banana milk in one hand, and her face wearing the most impressively composed expression he had ever seen on someone who had just been followed by probable criminals. He put his hand on the small of her back. It was the first time he had touched her like that, with something beyond gentleness, with something that was both reassurance and claim, and he felt her breath change slightly at the contact. "We're going to walk out together," he said quietly near her ear. "My car is 30 seconds away. Don't look for the men." "I already memorized their faces," she said. "Of course you did," he said. Outside, Sunwoo's men had disappeared. They would know better than to move with Jiwoo present. But the message had been sent, and Jiwoo had received it. That night, after Zara was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Adeze sat across from Jiwoo at the kitchen table and said, "Tell me how bad this is." He told her the truth, all of it this time. Sunwoo, the board, the risk, the fact that being connected to him made her a target. She listened. She wrapped both hands around her mug of tea and she listened. And when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been a target before. My ex-husband's family tried to take Zara from me when we divorced. They had more money and more lawyers than I had, and I fought for 14 months. And I kept her. I've been a target." She looked up at him. "What I want to know is, are you afraid?" He looked at her. "I don't get afraid. Everyone gets afraid. she said simply. The question is what you do with it. I protect what's mine, he said, and the words came out with more weight than he intended, and they both felt it land between them like something being placed on a table, an offering, or a declaration, or both. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He looked down at their hands, her warm amber-brown fingers over his. The hand that had signed papers that ended careers, that had gripped phones while issuing orders that changed the shape of Seoul's criminal geography. The same hand that, apparently, a 6-year-old girl grabbed 2 fingers of in the rain and told needed more yellow. Jiwoo, Adeze said softly, I need you to know something. Tell me. I'm not a woman who needs saving. I need you to understand that before, she paused, before whatever this is becomes something I can't walk back from. I don't need a protector. I need a partner. Someone who stands beside me, not in front of me. He turned his hand over under hers, so they were palm to palm. I've been standing in front of everyone my whole life, he said quietly. I don't actually know how to stand beside someone, but I want to learn. She looked at him for a long time. Okay, she said softly. Okay. The major twist came at the worst possible moment, as major twists always do. It was a gala, the Kang Foundation annual charity event, the most visible public function of Jiwoo's legitimate world. He had invited Adeze. It had taken 3 conversations and 1 very compelling argument from Zara, who said with absolute authority that her mother looked like a queen and should go places where queens went, to convince her. She wore a gown the colour of deep burgundy, traditional kente fabric woven into the bodice in a way that was both modern and ancestral, a design she had created herself. She walked into the Grand Hyatt ballroom, and the room did what rooms always do when someone extraordinary enters them. It rearranged itself, quietly, in her direction. Jiwoo watched her from across the room and felt something settle inside him that had never been settled before, like a compass finding north. The evening was going well. Adeze was charming and composed and sharp, navigating the cold calculations of Seoul's elite with an elegance that came from genuine intelligence rather than performance. Jiwoo stayed near her. He introduced her to people. He watched her hold her own in conversations about design, economics, cultural exchange, and she was brilliant, and he felt something he would later identify, with some difficulty, as pride. Then Park Sun-woo appeared at his elbow. Chairman Kang. His smile was architectural, built to look warm, structurally hollow. I see you've brought a guest. Sun-woo. Jiwoo's voice was flat as a lake before a storm. Sun-woo looked at Adeze. Lovely, he said, in a way that was the opposite of a compliment. I was reading about Sion Studio today. Interesting that they've been expanding their consultant contracts. A woman from Ghana, wasn't it? He looked at Adeze directly. You work in textiles, yes? I design, Adeze said. Her tone was pleasant. Her eyes were not. Of course. Sun-woo smiled his built smile. You know, I sit on the advisory board of the Career Design Council. We review all foreign creative contracts over a certain value threshold. Just compliance work, you understand. Routine. He looked at Jiwoo. Very routine. He walked away. Adeze looked at Jiwoo. He just threatened my job. Yes. Through the Design Council. He has enough influence to block my contract renewal. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he's not going to stop at my job, is he? No. She nodded once, slowly. Then she picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray, took one sip, set it down, and straightened her spine. "Then we need to be smarter than him," she said. He looked at her. "Tell me everything you have on him," she said. "Every financial irregularity, every illegal move, everything you've been keeping in reserve. It's time to use it." "Adeze." Jiwoo. Her voice was quiet and absolutely firm. "He came after my livelihood. He's using his position to threaten a woman who came to this country legally, working legally, raising her child and minding her own business. I'm not going to sit still while someone with too much power decides I'm an acceptable casualty in his game with you." She looked him directly in the eyes. "I said I needed a partner. Let me be one." He stared at her for a long moment, and something in him, the last wall, the deepest layer, came down. "There's a USB drive," he said quietly, "in my office. 3 years of financial irregularities, shell company transfers, bribery records. Enough to end him and take down both board members who protect him."
Why haven't you used it?
"Because using it would require making it public, and making it public would expose elements of my own organization's history that I've been quietly trying to bury." She thought about this for exactly 4 seconds. "How buried does it need to be?" "Deeply. Then we release it anonymously," she said. "To the Financial Supervisory Service. Clean hands, no direct connection to you. He goes down, the board reshuffles, and you spend the next 5 years building the version of the Kang organization that your children can inherit without apology." He went very still at the word children. She seemed to realize what she had said, and something moved across her face, a slight color, a slight catch of breath. "I mean," she started. "No," he said softly. "Don't take it back." She looked at him. The ballroom hummed around them. Seoul glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows like it was showing off. "Adeze," he said. He had practiced being a man of few words his whole life. Every important sentence he had ever delivered had been short and precise. This one, he realized, was no different. "I want to build something with you. Something that doesn't need to be hidden. Something Zara can grow up inside and feel safe." Her eyes were very bright. "Something yellow," she said softly. A rare, real smile crossed his face. "Something yellow." She laughed, that laugh, the one he'd been collecting, and she leaned forward and rested her forehead briefly against his shoulder, just for a moment, just enough to let herself be held by his presence without dissolving into it. And he stood absolutely still, as if movement might break something precious. If this story is making you feel everything, you are not alone. Go ahead and like and subscribe. Every story we tell is made for moments exactly like this one. The next 6 weeks were war, conducted in the language of documents and silence. Adeze was meticulous. She had a designer's eye for structure and pattern, and she applied it to the financial records with the kind of focused intelligence that left Jiwoo genuinely speechless twice. She identified 3 additional threads of evidence he had missed, cross-referenced shell company names that appeared in both Sunwoo's records and a property scandal from 6 years earlier that had been quietly buried. She organized everything into a package so clean and clearly mapped that when it landed anonymously on the desk of the FSS investigator assigned to corporate financial crime, the investigation opened within 48 hours. Park Sun-woo was called in for questioning on a Tuesday. He resigned from the Kang organization on Friday. The 2 board members who had been his shields, suddenly exposed and unprotected, spent the following week in quiet negotiations that ended with their own resignations and a restructured board that Jiwoo filled with people whose loyalty was current and whose competence was genuine. On the night Jiwoo received confirmation that the last piece had fallen into place, he drove to Itaewon. He didn't call ahead. He just appeared at the door of the apartment with a bag of groceries, because, in the past weeks, feeding Zara had somehow become a thing that he did, and he had opinions about it, strong opinions, most of which Zara agreed with, and Adeze pretended to resist before always ending up at the table, eating everything. Zara opened the door. She was wearing a yellow pajama set with stars on it, and she looked up at him with instant suspicion. "Your face looks different," she said. "Different how?" She studied him. "Less heavy," she said finally. He looked at her. "You're 6, he said. 6 3/4 now, she corrected, and stepped back to let him in. Adeze was in the kitchen on the phone, speaking rapid twee that stopped when she saw him. She finished the call quickly and stood in the kitchen doorway looking at him. "It's done?" she asked. "It's done." She exhaled, long, slow, like she had been holding part of that breath for weeks. He moved into the kitchen and set the groceries down, and they cooked together. Jollof rice and Korean braised pork, which had somehow become their standard meal, a combination that Zara had declared her favourite food in the entire world, and the apartment filled with the sounds and smells of something so domestic and real that it almost frightened him. Almost. After Zara was in bed, after the dishes were done, after the quiet had settled like something soft over the apartment, Adeze stood by the window, looking out at Seoul's nighttime glow. Jiwoo stood a few feet behind her. "My contract renewal came through today," she said. "Seon Studio. Full year, upgraded terms." "I know," he said. "Congratulations." She turned. "Did you have anything to do with it?" He held her gaze steadily. "I made a call, but the decision was already leaning toward yes. You earned it yourself." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked toward him, slowly, and stopped close enough that he could see the rise and fall of her breathing. "Jiwoo," she said, "I need to tell you something." "Tell me." 3 weeks ago, she said carefully, "I went to the doctor." A pause. "I haven't been feeling well in the mornings." The room was very quiet. "I didn't tell you because I needed to be sure," she said. "And then I needed time to—" She stopped. "It's very early, only 8 weeks. And I know this is—" She looked down and then back up at him, and the careful composure cracked just enough to show him the woman underneath, who was both terrified, and somewhere beneath the terror, something that looked like hope. "I know this is complicated. I know we never discussed—" "Adeze," he said. She stopped. He reached out and put both hands on her face, gently, and tilted it up to him. And he looked at her with the full weight of everything he was. The shadows and the damage, and the 15 years of trying to build something clean, and the crack in the dam that a 6-year-old girl had made in the rain on a Tuesday night. And he said, "I have spent my entire life building an empire I couldn't share with anyone. A name that was more weight than warmth. A life that had power in it, but nothing I could hold." He brushed his thumb gently across her cheek. "You walked into my city with your daughter and her crayon map, and you looked at me like I was a person, not a position. And Zara told me I needed more yellow. His voice was low and steady and entirely real. "I want this. I want this child. I want this life. I want to be the kind of man who deserves the way you both look at me." She was crying, quietly like she always did, the tears just falling without drama. "You're already that man," she whispered. "You've been becoming him for months." He kissed her forehead first. Then, when she lifted her face to his, he kissed her properly. Not with the practiced control of a man who managed everything, but with the honest, undefended tenderness of someone who had stopped pretending he didn't feel anything and had decided that feeling everything, for once, was a risk worth taking entirely. The months that followed were not without difficulty. There is no story worth telling that doesn't include difficulty. His mother was cautious at first, a woman of traditional expectations and elaborate pride. But she came around on the day Zara walked into her house, looked at the portrait of Jiwoo's late father on the wall, and said very seriously, "He has a sad face too. I think he needed yellow also." And Jiwoo's mother laughed so hard she had to sit down, and after that, she and Zara were inseparable, in a way that rewrote the Kang household's emotional architecture entirely. Adese's contract became a career. Seoul's studio launched an entire collection built around her designs. The collaboration of West African textile tradition and Korean contemporary fashion became a cultural moment, covered in the press as one of the most interesting creative stories of the year. She hired 2 assistants. She negotiated her own terms. She stood in the front row of her own collection's debut showcase and watched models walk in fabrics that had lived first in her imagination, and she held Jiwoo's hand in the front row, and he held back without thinking about whether it was correct, because it was natural, because she had made him natural. Zara started first grade. She learned Korean with the confident speed of a child whose brain was still elastic and hungry. She made friends with a ferocity and cheerfulness that left teachers describing her as a force of nature in the nicest possible way. She called Jiwoo Appa for the first time on a Sunday morning, without announcement, without ceremony, completely casually, in the middle of asking him to pass the juice. He sat very still for a moment. Adese was watching from across the table. He passed the juice. Then he excused himself to the balcony for approximately 2 minutes, and when he came back, his eyes were slightly red, and he sat down and ate his breakfast, and nobody said a word about it, which was the most loving thing they could have done. Their daughter was born in the autumn, in the hour before dawn, when Seoul is quietest, and the air smells of persimmon and the first cold edge of the season coming. They named her Haewon, meaning to loosen, to be freed, which Adese said was what this whole season of their lives had been, really, when she thought about it. A loosening, a freeing.
Jiwoo sat in the hospital chair with Haewon against his chest.
This impossible small creature, warm and breathing, her tiny fingers curling and uncurling against his heart. And he was a man who had been feared his entire adult life. A man who had watched rivals crumble and built towers of influence in the shadow economy of the city he owned. And he sat in the pale hospital light and felt absolutely nothing like any of those things. He felt like a man who had been lost and found. 3 years later, at a small private ceremony in a garden in Itaewon, the same district where the rain had fallen, where a small girl in a yellow raincoat had stopped a powerful man in his tracks and asked him the question that changed everything. Kang Jiwoo married Adese Mensah. Zara was the flower girl. She wore yellow, obviously, a dress she had personally selected with the same ferocious certainty she applied to everything. She took the job with tremendous seriousness, walking the petal-strewn path with Haewon on her hip, because Haewon had refused to be left out of the walking portion and Zara, as always, had simply solved the problem. When Adeze reached the end of the aisle and stood in front of Jiwoo, and the officiant asked if they had their own words, Jiwoo looked at his wife, this extraordinary woman who had walked into his rain-soaked city with her child and her crayon map and her refusal to be diminished, and he said, "I was lost, for a long time. I built things and controlled things, and I was very successful at being lost." He paused. A 6-year-old girl in a yellow raincoat asked me if I was lost too. And the answer was yes. And then she introduced me to her mother. He smiled, the rare, real smile that Adeze had slowly, patiently, lovingly uncovered over 3 years of rain and jollof rice and Seoul nights and battles fought side by side. "You didn't save me. You're right that you're not a woman who saves people. You did something better. You stayed beside me while I saved myself. That's the bravest thing anyone has ever done for me." Adeze pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. "My turn," she said softly. "I came to Seoul running toward something and away from something at the same time. I had Zara and my work, and enough stubbornness to fill a shipping container. And I thought that was enough. I thought I had everything I needed." She looked at him. "And then you came to find my daughter in the rain, carrying all that sadness and all that power, and all that terrible need for yellow things. And you taught me that being found by the right person doesn't mean you were broken before. It just means you were walking towards something." She glanced at Zara. "Both of us were." Zara, from her position as flower girl / small adult in charge, looked between them with profound satisfaction. She turned to the guests and said in a clear, carrying voice, "He definitely has more yellow in him now. I fixed him." The garden erupted in laughter. Haewon, from Zara's hip, blew a spit bubble in agreement. Jiwoo looked at his family, this impossible, loud, beautiful, extraordinary family that had begun with a rainy Tuesday and a crayon map and a question from a child. And he allowed himself completely and without reservation to be full. And somewhere in the city, the rain began again. Soft this time. The kind of rain that doesn't ask you to shelter from it, just walks beside you, washing everything clean. Thank you so much for staying until the very end of this story. If this journey moved you, if Zara made you smile, if Adeze made you feel seen, if Jiwoo made your heart ache in the best way, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that being found is possible, that love can walk in through the most unexpected door, and that sometimes all it takes to change a man's entire life is a small girl in a yellow raincoat who refuses to believe that anyone is beyond saving. We have so many more stories waiting for you. See you in the next one.